This is the moment Caicedo's wonder strike put the Blues ahead, but at this very moment, there's another tactical element unfolding, one that led to Chelsea downing the champions. And it was such a glaring issue that it only took Arne Slot 15 minutes to look to address it. So let's look at not just that, but all of the major tactical issues in this match. When Chelsea were building up from deep, Liverpool ended up defending in an extremely lopsided 4-4-2. Gakpo would drop deep, while the rest of the midfield would roughly be man-to-man with Chelsea's, with the goal being to stop easy progression through the centre. And because Caicedo was deeper than Gusto and Fernandes, it could at times early on be pretty easy to stop the build-up, with Szoboszlai trying to stay touch-tight to Caicedo. Naturally, it was Fernandes rather than Gusto who would look to be the secondary pivot and try and assist Caicedo. But it looked like it would be a pretty straightforward evening for the Liverpool midfield, as they could simply drop with the man and remain man-to-man. And when looking at Chelsea's attacking sides, you could be forgiven for thinking that Liverpool was successful in stopping the central play. But the reality is they were walking straight into Chelsea's traps, particularly down that left-hand side. And that's because in the lopsided 4-4-2, it was Salah's job to join Isak in the press, so that they could effectively apply man-to-man pressure, forcing them backwards or long, where the Liverpool Twin Towers would probably come out on top aerially. Salah had to ensure he was cutting out the direct pass into Cucurella to ensure the left-back was in his cover shadow. If this shape was successful, not only would it allow their man-to-man press, it also meant that the aging Salah wouldn't have as much tracking back to do. But here's the problem: if he got his angles even slightly wrong, it meant that Cucurella could receive freely and drive up the pitch, forcing Gravenberch to cover the wide region. Like we see here, with Salah being caught pressuring Badiashile, but from the wrong side. Now, Cucurella can get his head up and line up a pass into the winger. But even when Salah had his angle perfect, it was still pretty easy for Chelsea to take advantage of this with a simple wall pass. Enzo increasingly would drop, knowing that Gravenberch would follow him, and despite the pressure, all it took was one touch from Enzo to find Cucurella in space, and Salah would not track back for the most part, meaning that suddenly the right back would find themselves 2 versus 1 down, with Gravenberch having to cover across, meaning that they now have a man less in the midfield. So if Chelsea acted quickly, they could get into dangerous positions out wide or through the centre. Gravenberch was being forced into impossible situations like this, where if he stayed central, Bradley was 2 versus 1 down. But when he went across to cover, the extra Chelsea midfielder in Enzo could get his cross in essentially unchallenged. Even when Caicedo strikes, we can see that Chelsea are now being even more aggressive and looking to take advantage of the Liverpool press, as we see Enzo dropping even more aggressively and Cucurella moving between the lines. And again, the 2 versus 1 situation means that if Caicedo hadn't produced such a stunning finish, he would have had the option to find Garnacho, who was completely unmarked. Gravenberch knew that the situation was unsustainable, and in the 17th minute, after another Chelsea man gets a free cross, he signals to the touchline that something needs to be done, and Slot looked to change things up. But just before we get to what Slot did, there was one huge advantage of this dynamic for Liverpool though, and that was the transition. If Cucurella had committed high up the pitch, Salah was perfectly positioned to make the run into the space like we saw on a few occasions. So how did Slot look to fix the pressing problem? He still wanted pressure on the Chelsea centre-backs, but now it was Szoboszlai rather than Salah joining Isak. The Hungarian would be the man to try and keep Caicedo in his cover shadow while still applying pressure to the centre-back. The problem, of course, is that if Caicedo was able to create the angle to receive the pass, where before he essentially never had any space to take a touch when Liverpool were man-to-man, now all of a sudden he was receiving in plenty of room to turn and try and take advantage of the 3 versus 2 in the midfield. Or the likes of Van Dijk would now be drawn out of position, trying to even up the numbers in the midfield. And the thing is, even when Salah was in this position, he wasn't all of a sudden turning into a defensive monster, meaning that there was still the potential for Bradley to be overloaded 2 versus 1. So Slot once again reverted to having Salah press the centre-back, so that at least they would have absolute solidity in the centre, even moving Szoboszlai to right-back in the second half for his dynamism in dealing with this 2 versus 1. And the left side overload, of course, ended up being essential to the winner, as Cucurella was driving outside of Salah, and the 2 Chelsea men higher up overload the right-back as they drive up the pitch, eventually culminating in the goal. But this was far from a blowout, so what were Liverpool looking to do when they were in possession? Chelsea were committed to defending man-to-man in the midfield, and just like Liverpool, they stopped almost all of the play through the central channels. And much like Liverpool, Chelsea were dependent on a wide man to look to apply the pressure in Garnacho. But there were a couple of key differences. Garnacho did a much better job of consistently cutting out the line to Bradley, and secondly, even if he didn't succeed, where Liverpool in defending stuck to a 4, Garnacho was always backed up by Cucurella, who would push up as Chelsea shifted to a 3, with Neto on the far side dropping a little deeper. So where Liverpool looked to gain an advantage instead was right through the centre of the park. If the Chelsea midfield were all occupied by going man-to-man, it presented the opportunity for a fourth man to make the difference, and at first, this was Isak dropping deep, and it might have been successful had the centre-back not been so aggressive in dropping with his man. The Reds even looked to tweak this with Isak now moving left and Gakpo being the fourth man, but again, the centre-back did an excellent job of initially tracking the dropping forward and then passing him on as he drifted wide, allowing him to still be aggressive on the actual fourth man. And when Wirtz came on, we saw him introduce some indecision into that aggressive Chelsea man-to-man midfield, as he could drop extremely deep with Caicedo being hesitant to follow, due to that ability for the forward and the wide man to drop into the space created. While at the same time, the opposing movements from the dropping forward and the running midfielder could lead to situations where Liverpool almost took advantage. If you enjoyed this analysis, check out Tactics 12 for free, where over the course of 12 days I will teach you the fundamentals of analysis for absolutely free. Top link in the description. But I want to know, what did you make of this match? Drop it down in the comments below. And if you want to take a closer look at an iconic Liverpool team of the past and one of the most tactically interesting sides in Premier League history, check it out by clicking on screen now.